What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Echoes of Elsewhere, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of urban exploration, the forgotten places, the hidden stories, and the thrill of uncovering what's been left behind. I'm your host, Courtney Autumn, and today we're diving into one of the most debated and thought-provoking topics in the Urbex community, which is ethics. Things like what it means to explore responsibly and where we draw the line between curiosity and disrespect, and how we can ensure that our adventures preserve the integrity of the spaces while staying true to the spirit of exploration. Before we dive in, a quick reminder: if you've ever had an ethical dilemma while exploring, or you just want to weigh in, I'd love to hear your story, so find me on social media at Urbex Echoes, or drop me a comment. All right, so let's jump right in. As you guys know, Urbex, urban exploration, exploring the abandoned, all of that exists in a very delicate gray area. There's always the question of respect, which I'm constantly bringing up on here, but I am so dedicated to honoring these spaces. And I know I'm not the only one, because some explorers follow a very strict leave no trace mantra: no graffiti, no vandalism, no souvenirs, but others see abandoned places as kind of a free-for-all. They think if it's left behind, it's fair game, which is not the case, you guys. So I'm here to talk about it. There's also the element of privacy. When we step into an abandoned house, for example, are we violating a deeply personal space? Additionally, what happens when we encounter personal belongings, photographs, letters, documents, furniture left behind? Handling these items with respect is super crucial. So as explorers, we're constantly deciding what should be documented and left in place. Does the preservation of it all require a different approach? And oftentimes, each place, each exploration, each adventure will require a different approach. These moments challenge us to consider not only the story of the space, but also the dignity of the people who live there and those who potentially still own it, because oftentimes there is still ownership. Even if a place is abandoned or seems abandoned, it's likely that somewhere out there is an owner. So with all of that in mind, social media also plays a really huge role in how we interact with these spaces. Sharing photos or locations can bring visibility to forgotten places, which is what we're all here for, let's be real. But it can also lead to really unfortunate and unintended consequences. So a beautiful photo might attract more explorers, but it might also invite vandals or individuals who prioritize destruction over preservation. We should try to practice balancing some of the ways that we showcase these spaces so we can protect them from harm and for future explorers who also want to document and explore them and do things the right way. And of course, legally, we're often walking a fine line. Is stepping onto private property for curiosity's sake trespassing? Yes. Or is it simply a way of documenting spaces that might otherwise be forgotten? Both are true, but these are questions I think about constantly, and today we are going to unpack them together. So to give you guys a better sense of the spectrum of perspectives, I've talked to some fellow urban explorers and have gotten them to give me their take on these things. And a lot of them say that they make sure to leave the place untouched, that they are there to document and not destroy, Some have admitted to taking small objects, a bottle cap, an old key, film slips, which I'm guilty of, because sometimes you feel like if a place is going to be demolished, that you're kind of rescuing an item. I'm definitely not here to encourage anyone to take things from bandos. Generally speaking, it is no harm, no foul. If you do your research and you know that a place has been abandoned for a really long time, it's difficult to get in trouble, but it's not impossible. And I definitely know explorers who have gotten in trouble for this exact thing and literally taken something that is ridiculous. And that's a big thing too, is that things vary by location. And by that, I don't just mean by your city or state. I mean like by location, by property owner, by who you're dealing with, by how the person responsible or the person that has any authority over the situation is going to react, how you interact with those people, all of that. We have to keep the property owner's perspective in mind. Abandoned or not, like I said, these spaces often belong to someone, and liability issues can make them super nervous about explorers like us poking around. It's a conversation worth having. If you're a property owner and you've dealt with urban explorers, I'd love to hear your thoughts too. I'm here to get all the perspectives and all the takes on all the things. So as explorers, we have to ask ourselves why we're drawn to these spaces. Is it the nostalgia of stepping into the past, the thrill of the unknown, or simply capturing a perfect photograph? And it's really hard sometimes to keep in mind that with that curiosity comes consequences. Trespassing could lead to fines or even arrest. And let's not forget the risks to our safety. Unstable floors, broken glass, hazardous chemicals, materials, and even the possibility of encountering other people with not so great intentions. Especially for me as a female explorer, and I'm sure I speak for most female explorers when I am saying this, but we have to be extra cautious, especially if we're trying to do any kind of solo exploring, which I never recommend, especially if you're a female. But you never know who you're going to cross. You could even come across a wild animal, and if you're by yourself, it's a lot harder to defend yourself sometimes and scare things off or people off. And I'm not recommending taking 7 people exploring with you either, but have a buddy system. But there's lots of different risks involved, obviously. And I think that the most important thing always is to proceed with caution just as much as you should proceed with respect. And that's for anything that you might encounter, including security. There's also a question of how our actions affect the reputation of the Urbex community. Do we want to be seen as vandals, or do we want to be seen as respectful historians and documenters of forgotten places? So I feel like for many of us, I'm not going to speak for all of us because I can't speak for all of us, but so for most urban explorers, the unwritten rules of urban exploration serve as a moral compass. Beyond leave no trace and location secrecy, these rules include how we interact with others that we encounter, whether they're fellow explorers or security, like I said. In any case, treating security and law enforcement with respect and honesty can often de-escalate situations. So that is always a pro tip in any situation, not even just in Urbex, just in any situation. If you're nice to the cops, odds are they'll be nice to you. Not every time, but most of the time. Similarly, when crossing paths with other explorers, there's an unspoken etiquette to share the space peacefully and avoid disrupting each other's experience, because we're all here for the same thing. These are really small but significant gestures, and they help maintain the integrity of the Urbex community, which is why I wanted to come do an episode on this today. One of the first golden rules I can think to mention, which I have briefly brought up, is to leave no trace. To be honest, I can't help but think of Kay and Agonio every time someone mentions this first golden rule of Urbex. You're probably familiar with Kay, who is a badass urban explorer, photographer, filmmaker, and host of the No Tracers podcast. They've also been here for an interview, so if you missed it, make sure you rewind a few episodes and check that out. But my point is, Kay has taken Leave No Trace and made it their brand, literally. And I couldn't be more grateful because I think it's the most important rule and reminder, really, of how to navigate Urbex. If you're lucky enough to explore a space, don't damage it, and definitely don't take anything unless it's destined for destruction or you've been granted permission, of course. Moving on to the next one, which is also a pretty important one that I find myself having a lot of conversations about with fellow explorers, which is location secrecy. Sharing the coordinates of an incredible spot might seem harmless, but it can lead to unintended consequences, obviously. As vandals or inexperienced explorers could destroy the very thing you cherished. And I know at the same time, some argue that keeping locations secret prevents these spaces from being preserved or appreciated. It's a tough call. I'm curious to know what you guys think. And I'm not saying keep them under lock and key, but I think share your spots with people that you know and trust, and you know for sure that they are doing the exact same thing you're doing and they're preserving, and that they also aren't going to share the location with everyone, because that's 9 times out of 10 how these things happen. Urban exploration is an incredible way to connect with history, architecture, and even ourselves, but it's also a responsibility. Researching a site beforehand is crucial, not only to avoid hazardous conditions like unstable structures or toxic materials, like I said, but also to ensure you're aware of any legal implications. And that is so super important. But in any case, by preparing ahead of time, you can make your adventure safer and more respectful of the spaces you explore. And yeah, I'd just love to hear all of your thoughts on this topic. Where do you guys draw the line? Send me a message on social media at Urbex Echoes, or comment on here on Spotify. I also have a website. Oh yeah, my website launched, you guys. I forgot to announce my website is live. There is a link below wherever you're listening from. It should be there. If not, find me on Instagram at Urbex Echoes, and all of the links are there that you need for finding me. I said that weird, but anyways, I am thrilled to share some super exciting news for the next episode, because I will be sitting down with none other than Backroads to Abandoned, one of the most captivating explorers in the Urbex community. We'll talk about her adventures, her perspective on ethics, and the stories behind some of her most iconic explorations. And what's even more exciting than that is that Backroads to Abandoned and I are meeting this weekend to go explore together. It will be our first official time meeting in person. We've got a day trip planned to explore several spots together, and I cannot wait to share that adventure with you guys. I'm really excited about it. So she will be here for an interview, and you'll be seeing her pop up on my social media. So again, make sure you find me on Instagram at Urbex Echoes and give me a follow, and be on the lookout for this weekend's adventures, because it's going to be so exciting and so much fun. So stay tuned for what's likely to be an unforgettable journey and adventure with Backroads to Abandoned. I will link her information in the description as well, so you guys can find her and look at her stuff. It is really, really amazing, magical, captivating work, and I just love her, and I love everything she does, and I think you guys will too, so I'm happy to introduce her on here. With all of that said, I will be back next week. Until then, keep exploring the allure in the abandoned, the beauty of decay, and the echoes of elsewhere.